Ethan had always lived in the middle of a busy, thriving town where everything seemed to be a race: bigger homes, faster cars, trendier clothes and shinier gadgets. Every morning he woke up and scrolled through his phone, checking what others had bought, what vacations they were taking, and how successful their lives appeared to be. Somewhere deep inside he believed that life was a competition, and unless he kept collecting more and more he was falling behind. His apartment was filled with things he thought would make him happy: expensive shoes stacked in boxes, the latest phone models lined up like trophies, and decorations he barely noticed. But no matter how much he bought, the emptiness inside him never faded. It was as if his heart had a hole that nothing could fill. His closest friend Richard was a constant reminder of this emptiness. Richard was everything Ethan thought he needed to be: wealthy, confident and admired. He drove a sleek black car that turned heads wherever it passed. His house stood on the edge of town, enormous and shining, with a garden that looked like it had been pulled out of a magazine. Richard wore tailored suits, traveled to exotic destinations, and posted pictures that gathered hundreds of likes. Whenever Ethan visited Richard's home, he felt like a small shadow standing in someone else's world. His own apartment suddenly seemed dull, and his possessions, though costly, appeared meaningless. Instead of inspiring him, Richard's success fueled a quiet envy that gnawed at him day and night. Ethan's restlessness wasn't just about possessions. It bled into his relationships and work. He couldn't enjoy dinner with friends without comparing their achievements to his. He couldn't scroll through social media without feeling like a failure. At the office he pushed himself harder, not because he loved his work, but because he wanted the next raise, the next promotion, the next step that would bring him closer to Richard's level. But with every step forward, happiness slipped further away, like a mirage in the desert. He often lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why life felt so heavy. He had money in his account, friends to talk to, and a comfortable place to live, yet peace never stayed with him. It was as if his soul was hungry for something he couldn't name. Sometimes he thought back to his childhood, when joy was found in simple things: playing in the park, eating ice cream on a summer afternoon, laughing with his parents at the dinner table. Back then happiness didn't require much, but somewhere along the way the simple joys were replaced by endless demands, and he became a prisoner of wanting more. One evening after a long day at work, Ethan met Richard for coffee. Richard spoke casually about a new business he was investing in, a villa he was planning to buy, and a luxury watch he had just ordered. Ethan forced a smile, pretending to be impressed, but inside he felt a heavy mix of admiration and bitterness. He thought to himself, "When will I ever get there? When will I finally feel enough?" The question haunted him. As he walked home that night, surrounded by glowing city lights and the noise of traffic, he felt lonelier than ever. The city, which once thrilled him with its energy, now seemed to mock him with its glittering advertisements that whispered, "Buy this, and you'll be happy." Ethan's restlessness soon turned into exhaustion. He tried everything to distract himself: gym memberships, weekend parties, online shopping and expensive dinners. Each new experience gave him a temporary high, but soon after, the emptiness returned, stronger than before. It was like pouring water into a leaking bucket. No matter how much he poured, it never stayed full, and though he would never admit it to anyone, he felt trapped in his own life, a life that looked fine from the outside but felt hollow inside. One weekend, unable to bear the weight of his thoughts, Ethan decided to leave the city for a few days. He told himself he needed a break, a change of scenery, maybe even a bit of silence away from the endless noise of comparison. He packed a small bag, booked a train ticket, and headed for the countryside. As the train moved away from the tall buildings and billboards, the view outside his window began to change. Wide fields stretched endlessly, dotted with small houses and farms. The air seemed calmer, the sky clearer, and for the first time in months, Ethan felt a faint sense of relief. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but deep down he hoped this trip might quiet the storm inside him. He hoped that away from the competition of the city and the shadow of Richard's success, he could finally breathe. What he didn't know yet was that this journey would introduce him to people who lived by a completely different truth, a truth that would challenge everything he believed about happiness and what it meant to live a fulfilling life. At that point though, Ethan was just a restless young man, running from his own dissatisfaction, unaware the answers he sought had little to do with money, status, or possessions. His heart was still chasing illusions, but the countryside was about to show him a new way, a way of simplicity, gratitude, and sharing. As Daniel walked home that evening, he couldn't shake off the conversation he had with his father. The words lingered in his mind like a quiet echo: "Be happy with what you have." It sounded simple, but in his heart, Daniel felt restless. He lived in a small wooden house at the edge of the village with his parents, who worked hard every day just to make ends meet. Their meals were modest, their clothes were plain, and their life was steady but far from luxurious. Yet his parents carried a calmness in their eyes, a steady contentment that Daniel couldn't quite understand. He, on the other hand, often found himself envying the children in the wealthier part of the town who wore fine clothes, played with expensive toys, and talked about trips and adventures he could only dream of. That gap gnawed at him, and though he tried to hide it, it left him feeling incomplete. The next morning, Daniel's father gave him a simple task: take a basket of bread his mother had baked, and deliver it to their neighbor Mrs. Thompson, a kind but frail old woman who lived alone. At first Daniel didn't think much of it. Carrying bread to someone else seemed ordinary, almost unimportant. But as he walked with the basket in his hands, he noticed little things along the way that he had never paid attention to. The sun peeked through the trees, scattering golden light across the path. The birds sang melodies that seemed to greet the morning. Even the scent of the fresh bread in the basket carried a warmth that made him smile unconsciously. For a moment, Daniel forgot his envy, absorbed instead in the quiet beauty of his surroundings. When he reached Mrs. Thompson's home, she greeted him with a tired smile. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the bread, her voice carrying both gratitude and weariness. "Thank you, Daniel," she said softly. "This means more to me than you know." Daniel stayed for a while, sitting with her as she talked about her younger days. She told him stories of her late husband, of times when the world felt simpler, when sharing what little you had brought people together. Daniel listened, fascinated by the gentle joy in her voice. Even though her life now was filled with loneliness and struggle, he realized then that happiness wasn't only about possessions, it was about memories, moments and connections with others. On his way back, Daniel saw a group of children by the roadside. One of them, a boy about his age, was sitting quietly, holding nothing in his hands while the others enjoyed treats they had bought from the market. Something tugged at Daniel's heart. He thought about the bread Mrs. Thompson had received with such gratitude. Without thinking too long, he reached into the basket, pulled out one loaf left for his family, and offered it to the boy. The child's eyes widened in surprise, then softened into a smile that radiated warmth. "Thank you," the boy whispered, his voice filled with genuine relief. For the first time, Daniel felt something different inside. It wasn't the fleeting excitement of wanting new toys or clothes. It was a quiet, steady peace that seemed to grow stronger with every step he took. He realized that by giving something away, he hadn't lost anything. He had gained a feeling he had never known before. His heart felt full in a way it never had, when he dreamed of riches. That night, as Daniel sat with his parents at dinner, the food was simple, just bread, soup and a few vegetables from their small garden. But instead of focusing on what was missing, he found himself noticing the warmth of the room, the way his mother hummed softly as she served, and the way his father's tired eyes softened with pride when looking at him. Daniel ate slowly, savoring every bite, every laugh, every word exchanged at the table. It wasn't about the food itself, but the love that surrounded it. For the first time he understood why his father always carried that calm contentment. It wasn't about having everything, it was about recognizing what you already had and treasuring it deeply. Daniel lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the boy who had smiled, because of a single loaf of bread. He thought about Mrs. Thompson's gratitude, about the warmth in his parents' eyes, about the golden sunlight and the songs of birds. These were not things money could buy. They were moments, gifts scattered throughout his life, waiting to be noticed. He realized how often he had overlooked them, blinded by his longing for what others had. That night, Daniel promised himself he would start seeing differently. He would start noticing the blessings already within his reach. Sleep came easily, and for the first time in a long while his dreams were not filled with what he lacked but with the richness of what he already held. In that quiet shift of perspective, Daniel began to understand the true meaning of his father's words. The next morning, Daniel woke up with a strange but comforting feeling in his chest. The world outside looked the same. The same trees, the same little house, the same village noises, but something in him had shifted. He no longer saw things as he used to. On his way to fetch water from the well, he passed the market square. Children ran about laughing, merchants shouted about their goods, and villagers carried baskets filled with fruits and grains. Normally, Daniel would have looked at the richer families and felt that familiar sting of envy. But today, instead of noticing what he didn't have, his eyes fell on different things. The laughter between two friends, the way a mother held her child's hand tightly, the smell of warm bread that reminded him of his mother's kitchen. He realized these small things carried a kind of joy money could never truly buy. As he walked, he noticed a young boy, barefoot and shivering near the well. His clothes were worn out, and his eyes darted toward the baskets of food others carried, filled with longing. Daniel paused, remembering the day before when he had shared his bread. For a moment, he hesitated. He wasn't carrying much, just a small apple his mother had given him. But the memory of the boy's grateful smile yesterday came rushing back, and without another thought, Daniel walked up and offered the apple. The boy's eyes widened in disbelief, then softened into tears as he accepted it. He whispered a thank you so quietly that only Daniel could hear. At that moment, Daniel felt an invisible thread connect them. Two boys with very little yet bound together by a simple act of kindness. As he continued his day, Daniel began to notice how often people overlooked each other's needs. He saw villagers rushing past the elderly, ignoring their slow steps. He noticed children mocking another boy who had patches on his clothes, and in those moments he realized something important. Happiness was not something you stumbled upon by accident or received as a gift from life. It was something you created by giving, by noticing, by sharing. His father's words about being happy with what you have now made sense in a deeper way. Having little was not a curse if you knew how to turn it into love, into kindness, into joy for others. Later that afternoon, Daniel helped his father in the small garden behind their home. The soil was tough, the sun was hot, but his father worked steadily, humming softly as though the hard labor didn't bother him. Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead and asked, "Father, doesn't it ever bother you that we don't have more?" His father smiled faintly, setting his tools aside for a moment. "Daniel," he said gently, "look around you. This garden gives us food. This house gives us shelter. Your mother's love fills our days, and we still have enough to share with others. Do you see? That is wealth greater than coins." Daniel stood still, absorbing those words. For the first time he saw the garden differently, not as a patch of soil too small compared to others, but as a treasure that kept his family alive. He saw his parents differently too, not as people without riches, but as people who knew the secret to living peacefully with what they had. And slowly Daniel realized that he had been looking at life the wrong way all along. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink across the sky, Daniel sat outside with his parents. The air was filled with the smell of fresh bread his mother had baked, and the quiet laughter of neighbors drifted through the village. He felt a calmness inside that he had never known before. Happiness wasn't waiting for him in some distant dream of riches. It was here, in the laughter, in the bread, in the love that surrounded him, and for the first time he felt no envy, no longing, only peace. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's heart continued to change with every small act of kindness he gave and resigned. The lesson that had begun with one piece of bread had now become part of the way he lived. He no longer woke up thinking about what he lacked. Instead, he thought about what he could give, even if it was just a smile, a helping hand, or a kind word. Daniel discovered that these little offerings made his days brighter than any coin ever could. One afternoon, while walking back from the fields, Daniel saw a group of travelers resting under a tree. They looked tired, their clothes dusty from the long road, and they had little food with them. Without hesitation, Daniel went home, gathered the bread his mother had baked, and brought it to them. The travelers were surprised by his generosity. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, said softly, "Young boy, the world needs more people like you. What you've given today will return to you in ways you cannot imagine." Daniel didn't fully understand what the man meant, but he felt a warmth spread through him. It wasn't the bread that filled his heart, but the gratitude in their faces. Soon word spread in the village about Daniel's small but thoughtful acts. People noticed how he shared even when he had little, and how he always carried joy on his face. Some children began to follow his example, offering part of their fruit to others, or helping the elderly with their baskets. Daniel realized that kindness was like a ripple in water. It started small but reached farther than one could ever see. His life had become proof that happiness grows when it is shared. One evening, while sitting outside his house, Daniel's father placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Son, you've learned what many grown men never understand. True wealth lies not in gold or possessions, but in a generous heart. When you give, you become rich in spirit, and when you appreciate what you have, you live without envy." Daniel looked around, the little garden, the warm bread, the laughter of his parents, the glow of the sunset, and his eyes filled with tears. He finally understood the truth fully. Happiness was not something far away to chase. It was already here, woven into his simple life. From that day on, Daniel never wished to trade his life for another's. He knew joy was not in the size of a home, the weight of a coin, or the clothes one wore. It was in gratitude, kindness, and the love that surrounded him. His story became one that inspired not only his village but also anyone who heard it, reminding them that being happy with what you have is the greatest treasure of all.